Hi, my name is Roslyn. I'm a sound engineer, music producer, and artist. I love sound, I love music, but I also love reading. I read quite a lot. I just thought maybe I'd make a video and combine those two things and recommend my favourite music type, music production, music industry books that I've enjoyed and want to share. I'm going to start with one I don't own physically and never owned physically because I got it from my university library when I was in first year. It's called How to Make It in the New Music Business, Practical Tips on Building a Loyal Following and Making a Living as a Musician by Ari Hernstead. And I really enjoyed this book. It was very easy to read, has some really current, up-to-date tips about starting off in the music industry that I enjoyed. Wasn't too heavy, wasn't too depressing, because I think the music industry is changing, but it's still quite a hard thing to crack. Hi, I'm on YouTube. I don't know if maybe like me, you're sick of reading How to Make It in the Music Industry, and it's written by some old white man who wandered into a studio when he was like 14 and they just gave him a job behind the desk and that was him set up. You know, it's a different place now, and this one seemed really up to date and really current and also kind of refreshing and hopeful. It had loads of great tips, like I say, maybe a bit US centric, so bear that in mind. But yeah, really enjoyable, read it in a day, really easy read, and I do recommend it to any of you who want to get into the industry, interested in the industry, that sort of thing. So that's my first book I'm going to recommend. So, Ever the Shit Stirrer, the next book I'm going to recommend, I'm going to go back on my word about an old white man wandering into a studio and getting a job and tell you to read this book called Here, There, Everywhere by Geoff Emerick. Now, Geoff Emerick was the Beatles recording engineer throughout most of their career, and then he went on to work with, I think, Paul McCartney and Wings, that sort of thing. He didn't just walk into Abbey Road one day. Well, it was called EMI back then. He did apply for a job when he was 16 and still at school. But on the second day at the job he got as an assistant engineer at EMI, the Beatles came in. So, you know, like, sometimes things just work out for people. And then that was his career, working with the Beatles. And do you know what? Good for him. The book is so interesting. It is all about him working with the band, developing these recording techniques with George Martin, and just kind of talking about the era and what they were like as people and what a day-to-day life was like. And I just found it just so interesting. I thought I know quite a lot about the Beatles, but I finished this book and thought like there were some new interesting facts there that I really enjoyed. So I'd say, yeah, if you like the Beatles, if you like reading about Abbey Road, recording techniques of the 60s, reading about the 60s, 70s, really interesting book. Recommend that one 100%. I'm mind deficient, so I ran out of breath really easily. The next book I'm going to recommend is She Bop by Lucy O'Brien. Let me get it. She Bop by Lucy O'Brien. Oh, that's upside down. Slay. She Bop by Lucy O'Brien. This is basically a definitive history of women in popular music. And she's interviewed loads and loads of artists throughout the years for this book. And they kind of talk about their experience in the industry, that sort of thing. There's a bunch of history there. Really interesting. It's all about women and their impact on the industry. And I think, you know, always remember where you came from, who carved the path for us. Read this. I think everyone should read this if they're interested about the industry. A lot of those kind of history books about music are going to be very male-centric because that's just how it is. So, men, you should read this. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I'd say maybe the writing is a little bit more academically inclined to the way it reads, but that's because Lucy O'Brien, I don't know, before she was a journalist. I think she wrote for NME, and then further on in her career she wrote more papers and like worked in universities, and I know that because she was my lecturer in my first year at university. So yeah, she was a great lecturer, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the book. Cool. The next book I'm going to recommend is by Patti Smith, who, that's the second time I've done that. That's crazy. And I'm not like trying to be like Patti Smith, M Train. A lot of you may have already heard of her book called Just Friends, which was a memoir about her relationship with her boyfriend, Robert someone. And this is more about her life after that relationship ended, because I think he passed away. And it was just so well written and makes me want to like maybe go and listen to her music. I've never been a fan, never been into Patti Smith, but I think after reading this book, I would want to go and listen to her stuff because I just really enjoyed the writing, really enjoyed the way, you know, she spoke about things. You were just kind of in it with her. She travels across the world. She goes and visits different places, talks to different artists. And yeah, it was just so interesting to just read about her. So yeah, I'd recommend that if you're into Patti Smith, or even if you're not, because you might be into her after you finish it. The next book I'm going to recommend is The Dark Stuff by Nick Kent. Nick Kent, I believe, was also a journalist for various magazines. And throughout his career, he kind of struck up a relationship with lots of these musicians. And he's kind of compiled all these articles and journals and essays about various musicians who have gone through really dark periods in their career, such as Brian Wilson, Syd Barrett, Kurt Cobain, Neil Young, Jerry Lee Lewis, that sort of thing. And artists who struggled with addiction and that sort of thing and had really dark periods in the career that they either got out of and turned into a pretty good human these days, or they passed away through addiction. Like, there's various stories about this, and they're all very, very real. And I think it was very interesting to kind of read about that really dark period in those artists' life, because that is the sort of thing, what you live through is kind of what makes you. And I think that's one of the good things about this book. You understand why they were the way that they were. There was a chapter on Brian Wilson and, how he always struggled. He was always a bit, he was always struggling. And, how he once just put a whole sandpit into his recording studio at home because he wanted it to be like a beach, like, say, fine. And just his childhood was messed up and his father was abusive. And you kind of think, well, yeah, like, no wonder he turned out the way he did. I think maybe there was too much writing about Neil Young and Iggy Pop, not interested in them two. Bit too much, a lot of writing about Neil Young and Iggy Pop. I don't know, maybe if you don't like Neil Young and Iggy Pop, there's no point reading this, because there was a lot. But in amongst those artists, there were other really interesting articles. The only thing that bothered me, the journalist kind of narrator, the voice slipped through, and I just felt like he was quite opinionated on things. And also, for God's sake, name a woman who wasn't a daughter or wife of these artists. And, like, I know it's about the dark periods of these artists' life, but surely there were women back then who also had dark periods and maybe came out of them, or maybe horribly passed away from these dark periods. I don't remember reading anything about any female artists, and I think that bothered me just for a little bit. But maybe that's because I am the way that I am. And that's the one thing I did not enjoy about this book, whatever. But I did enjoy reading it. I thought it was really interesting. So, yeah, read that one. Last book I'm going to recommend is a bit of an abstract one, a bit of a curveball. It's called Sounds, Wild and Broken by David George Haskell. It's basically about the sounds of our planet, the creative processes that produce these marvels, and the perils that sonic diversity now faces. It's just about sound around you. And I really enjoyed it. It just kind of made you kind of feel a bit more mindful about what you're listening to and the environment you're in. We have a lot of noise pollution these days. We have a lot of environmental impacts that are taking away the sounds of the bees and the birds. And, like, there's lots of traffic noise and that sort of thing. And it just kind of makes you think about what you can hear with your ears. Like, as music producers, sound engineers, we use our ears quite a lot. And I know as humans, you use your ears quite a lot. But this kind of made you just think about what you were listening to around you. And I just really enjoyed it. It was just almost like a break to just kind of think about, what birds can I hear right now? And, what would Earth sounded like in the prehistoric era where we had a completely different species of birds? What did birds sound like back then? What did dinosaurs sound like? Are there creatures at the bottom of the sea that make funny little noises? There are. And I just found it really interesting and really fun. So if you're into that sort of thing, read that too. A bit hefty, a lot. You got to kind of focus when you read it because it's quite sciencey-ish. And us artists, we're not very good at science or maths, but it's really good and I really enjoyed it. So, us artists, you said, yeah, fucking right. So yeah, that's books that I would personally recommend and that I've enjoyed over the last few years. I have read other books about music. I've read other books. I've read more than 6 books, I promise. So if you ever want a second video about more books about the music industry, then I can do that. Don't worry, I got nothing else on. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do the whole thing, like, comment, subscribe, share, because I'm a sound engineer, music producer, and I'm making fucking YouTube videos. So it would be nice if I could somehow get some work at one point. So if you want, you can share. So yeah, I think that's the end of this one. Thank you very much.